Lift, lifeless tree, your great maybe, Rabelais, the grand potato, IPHLA, Institute of Preparation, for the hereafter, or if, as we called it, Big If, engaged me for one term to speak on death, to lecture on the worm, wrote President McIber. You and I, and she, there a mere tot, moved from New Y to New Shade in another higher state. I love great mountains. From the iron gate of the ramshackle house we rented there, one saw a snowy form so far, so fair, that one could only fetch a sigh as if it might assist assimilation. IPH was a lavorium and a violet, a grave in reason's early spring, and yet it missed the gist of the whole thing. It missed what mostly interests the preterist, for we die every day, oblivion thrives, not on dry thigh bones, but on blood-ripe lives. And our best yesterdays are now foul piles of crumpled names, phone numbers and foxed files. I'm ready to become a floweret, or a fat fly, but never to forget. And I'll turn down eternity unless that melancholy and the tenderness of mortal life, the passion and the pain, the claret tail light of that dwindling plane off Hesperus, your gesture of dismay, on running out of cigarettes, the way you smile at dogs, the trail of silver slime, snails' leave or flagstones, this good ink, this rhyme, this index card, this slender rubber band which always forms when dropped in ampersand, are found in heaven by the newly dead, stored in its strongholds through the years. Instead, the Institute assumed it might be wise not to expect too much of paradise. What if there's nobody to say hello to the newcomer, no reception, no indoctrination? What if you were tossed into a boundless void, your bearings lost, your spirit stripped and utterly alone, your task unfinished, your despair unknown, your body just beginning to picturesque, anon undressable in mourning dress, your widow lying prone on a dim bed, herself a blur in your dissolving head? While snubbing gods, including the big G, IPH borrowed some peripheral debris from mystic visions, and it offered tips, the amber spectacles for life's eclipse, how not to panic when you're made a ghost. Sidle and slide, choose a smooth surd and coast, meet solid bodies and glissade right through, or let a person circulate through you. How to locate in blackness with a gasp, Terra the fair, an orbicle of jasp. How to keep sane in the spiral types of space, precautions to be taken in the case of freak reincarnation, what to do on suddenly discovering that you are now a young and vulnerable toad, plump in the middle of a busy road, or a bear cub beneath a burning pine, or a bookmite in a revived divine. Time means succession, and succession change, hence timelessness is bound to disarrange schedules of sentiment. We give advice to widower. He had been married twice. He meets his wives, both loved, both loving, both jealous of one another. Time means growth, and growth means nothing in Elysian life. Fondling a changeless child, the flax-haired wife grieves on the brink of a remembered pond, full of a dreamy sky, and also blonde, but with a touch of tawny in the shade, feet up, knees clasped on a stone balustrade. The other sits and raises a moist gaze toward the blue impenetrable haze. How to begin, which first to kiss, what toy to give the babe? Does that small silent boy know of the head-on crash which on a wild March night killed both the mother and the child? And she the second love with instep bare and ballerina black, why does she wear the earrings from the other's jeweled case? And why does she avert her fierce young face? For as we know from dreams, it is so hard to speak our dear dead. They disregard our apprehension, queasiness and shame, the awful sense that they're not quite the same. And our school chum killed in a distant war is not surprised to see us at his door, and in a blend of jauntiness and gloom points at the puddles in his basement room. But who can teach the thoughts we should roll call when morning finds us marching to the wall, under the stage direction of some goon, political, some ununiformed baboon? We'll think of matters only known to us, empires of rhyme, Indies of calculus, listen to distant cocks crow, and discern upon the rough grey wall a rare wall fern, and while our royal hands are being tied, taunt our inferiors, cheerfully deride dedicated imbeciles, and spit into their eyes just for the fun of it. Nor can one help the exile, the old man, dying in a motel with the loud fan revolving in the torrid prairie night, and from the outside, bits of colored light, reaching his bed like dark hands from the past, offering gems, and death is coming fast. He suffocates and conjures in two tongues, the nebulae dilating in his lungs. A wrench, a rift, that's all one can foresee. Maybe one finds Le Grand Néant. Maybe again one spirals from the tuber's eye. As you remarked the last time we went by the Institute, I really could not tell the difference between this place and hell. We heard cremationist guffaw and snort at graver men's announcing the retort as detrimental to the birth of wraiths. We all avoided criticizing faiths. The great star over blue reviewed the role planets had played as landfalls of the soul. The fate of beasts were pondered. A Chinese descanted on the etiquette at teas with ancestors and how far up to go. I tore apart the fantasies of Poe and dealt with childhood memories of strange, nacreous gleams beyond the adult's range. Among our auditors were a young priest, an old communist. IPH could at least compete with churches and the party line. In later years it started to decline. Buddhism took root, a medium smuggled in, pale jellies and a floating mandolin. Fra Karamazov, mumbling his inept, all is allowed into some classes crept, and to fulfill the fish wish of the womb, a school of Freudians headed for the tomb. That tasteless venture helped me in a way. I learned what to ignore in my survey of death's abyss. And when we lost our child, I knew there would be nothing. No self-styled spirit would touch a keyboard of dry wood to rap out her pet name. No phantom would rise gracefully to welcome you and me in the dark garden near the shagbark tree. What is that funny creaking, do you hear? It is the shutter on the stairs, my dear. If you're not sleeping, let's turn on the light. I hate that wind, let's play some chess, all right. I'm sure it's not the shutter, there, again. It is a tendril fingering the pane. What glided down the roof and made that thud? It is old winter tumbling in the mud. And what now shall I do? My night is pinned. Who rides so late in the night and the wind? It is the writer's grief, it is the wild March wind, it is the father with his child. Later came minutes, hours, whole days at last, when she'd absent from her thoughts so fast. Did life, the woolly caterpillar, run? We went to Italy, sprawled in the sun, on a white beach, with other pink or brown Americans, flew back to our small town, found that my bunch of essays, The Untamed Seahorse, was universally acclaimed. It sold 300 copies in 1 year. Again school started, and on hillsides where, round distant roads, one saw the steady stream of car lights all returning to the dream of college education. He went on, translating it to French, Morvel, and Dawn. It was a year of tempest. Hurricane Lalta swept from Florida to Maine. Mars glowed, Shahs married, gloomy Russians spied. Lang made your portrait, and one night I died. The Crawshaw Club had paid me to discuss why poetry is meaningful to us. I gave my sermon, a dull thing but short, as I was leaving in some haste to thwart the so-called question period at the end. One of those peevish people who attend such talks only to say they disagree stood up and pointed with his pipe at me. And then it happened, the attack, the trance, or what a mild fits. There sat by chance a doctor in the front row. At his feet patly I fell. My hearts were stopped to beat, it seems, and several moments passed before it heaved and went on trudging to a more conclusive destination. Give me now your full attention. I can't tell you how I knew, but I did know that I had crossed the border. Everything I loved was lost, but no aorta could report regret. A sun of rubber was convulsed and set, and blood-black nothingness began to spin. A system of cells interlinked within, cells interlinked within, cells interlinked within one stem. And dreadfully distinct against the dark, a tall white fountain played. I realized, of course, that it was made not of our atoms, that the sense behind the scene was not our sense. In life the mind of any man is quick to recognize natural shams, and then before his eyes the reed becomes a bird, the knobby twig an inchworm, and the cobra head a big wickedly folded moth. But in the case of my white fountain, what it did replace perceptually was something that, I felt, could be grasped only by whoever dwelt in the strange world where I was a mere stray. And presently I saw it melt away. Though still unconscious, I was back on earth. The tale I provoked my doctor's mirth. He doubted very much that in the state he found me in one could hallucinate or dream in any sense. Later, perhaps, but not during the actual collapse, no, Mr. Shade. But doctor, I was dead. He smiled, not quite, just half a shade, he said. However, I demurred. In mind, I kept replaying the whole thing. Again, I stepped down from the platform and felt strange and hot and saw the chap stand up and toppled, not because a heckler pointed with his pipe, but probably because the time was ripe for just a bump and wobble on the part, or a limp in an old unstable heart. My vision reeked with truth. It had the tone, the quiddity, and quaintness of its own reality. It was. As time went on, a constant vertical in triumph shone. Often, when troubled by the outer glare of street and strife, inward I'd turn, and there in the background of my soul it stood, Old Faithful, and its presence always would console me wonderfully. Then, one day, I came across what seemed a twin display. It was a story in a magazine about a Mrs. Z whose heart had been rubbed back to life by a prompt surgeon's hand. She told her interview of the land beyond the veil, and the account contained a hint of angels, and a glint of stained windows, and some soft music, and a choice of hymnal items, and her mother's voice. But at the end she mentioned a remote landscape, a hazy orchard, and I quote, "Beyond that orchard, though, a kind of smoke, I glimpsed a tall white fountain, and awoke." If on some nameless island Captain Smith sees a new animal and captures it, and if a little later Captain Smith brings back a skin, that island is no myth. Our fountain was a signpost, and a mark objectively enduring in the dark, strong as a bone, substantial as a tooth, and almost vulgar in its robust truth. The article was by Jim Coates. To Jim forthwith I wrote, got her address from him, drove west 300 miles to talk to her, arrived, was met by an impassioned purr, saw that blue hair, those freckled hands, that rapt Orchidea's hair, and knew that I was trapped. Who'd miss the opportunity to meet a poet so distinguished? It was sweet of me to come. I desperately tried to ask my questions. They were brushed aside. Perhaps some other time the journalist still had her scribblings. I should not insist. She plied me with a fruitcake, turning it all into an idiotic social call. "I can't believe," she said, "that it is you. I love your poem in the Blue Review, that one about Mont Blanc. I have a niece who'd climbed the Matterhorn. The other piece I could not understand, I mean the sense. Because of course the sound, but I'm so dense." She was, I might have persevered. It might have been more to tell her about the white fountain we both had seen beyond the veil. But if, I thought, I mentioned that detail, she'd pounce upon it as if upon a fond affinity, a sacramental bond, uniting mystically her and me, and in a jiffy our two souls would be brother and sister trembling on the brink of tender incest. "Well," I said, "I think it's getting late." I also called on Coates. He was afraid he had mislaid her notes. He took his article from a steel file. "It's accurate. I have not changed her style. There's one misprint, not that it matters much. Mountain, not fountain. The majestic touch. Life everlasting, based on a misprint." I mused as I drove homeward, take the hint, and stop investigating my abyss. But all at once it dawned on me that this was the real point, the contrapuntal theme. Just this, not text, but texture. Not the dream, but topsy-turvical coincidence. Not flimsy nonsense, but a web of sense. Yes, it sufficed that I in life could find some kind of link and bobolink, some kind of correlated pattern in the game, plexed artistry, and something of the same pleasure in it as they who played it found. It did not matter who they were. No sound, no furtive light came from their involute abode, but there they were, aloof and mute, playing a game of worlds, promating pawns to ivory unicorns and ebon fawns, kindling a life here, extinguishing a short one there, killing a Balkan king, causing a chunk of ice formed on a high-flying airplane to plummet from the sky and strike a farmer dead, hiding my keys, glasses, or pipe, coordinating these events and objects with remote events and vanished objects, making ornaments of accidents and possibilities. Storm-coated, I strode in. "Sybil, it is my firm conviction. Darling, shut the door. Have a nice trip. Splendid. But what is more, I have returned and convinced that I can grope my way to some, yes dear, faint hope."